Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jacksmiller. Now, the first enrollment center for the National Identification and Registration System, we've been calling it NIDS, will be ready by August, according to Minister Floyd Green, who is overseeing implementation. Now, this following the passage of the NIDS Act in Parliament late last year. The government's initial attempt at a mandatory national identification system hit an embarrassing snag when the Supreme Court struck down the law in 2019 as unconstitutional. So with Jamaica on the verge of implementing a national identification system based on a new act, are there still concerns? What's the timeline? How will it work? And what is it all about? Joining me on set, we have Floyd Green, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, and as I said, the Minister who is responsible for the implementation. We have with us as well Hugh Graham. He's the opposition spokesman on Commerce, Science and Technology, and attorney at law Andre Shackelford also with us. Remember, you can tweet along with us. Our hashtag is TVJ All Angles. And just to let you know that for a lot of the program today, we're giving it over to questions from members of the public. And I'm going to start with one of those video questions on the issue of financial sustainability. So let's run that.
Hi, I'm Nayoka Manning, and I must say that I am in support of NIDS. Now, the Honorable Floyd Green mentioned in his speech in Parliament that NIDS will be funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. Now, this agreement stems for 2 years and incorporates the design and the development of NIDS. Now, my question is, what does the government plan to do to ensure that we have financial security, to ensure that all the citizens of Jamaica are catered for, in the sense that Jamaica's population is constantly growing? So how do we ensure that we have financial security for this program's permanency?
Okay, now that's a really good question because, so we're held to implement projects, and then after the project funding finishes, we have programs sustaining the programs. So, Floyd Green.
Yeah, very good question. So one of the good things is that we do have funding, and funding is what we're utilizing now, and it has come by way of a loan that the government has taken, and that funding will carry us up to 2024. The approach that we've taken is to develop...
Which is just around the corner.
Yeah, so the approach that we've taken is to develop... we will be developing a new agency, the National Identification and Registration Authority, right? And we've gone through the process of hiring consultants to look at the organizational structure. One of the good things is in the consultancy, we've also looked at the business plan in terms of the financing and how it will finance itself. Clearly, what will happen after 2024 is that the government already is earmarking funds to take it on its books. So we've already started to look at what will it cost. We've started to look at the sort of inflow we already have. If you look at the act, you realize that the National Identification and Registration Authority will also have the Registrar General's Department as a part. So clearly we're going to look at the resources that come into the Registrar General Department, what will be required. But we have looked at identification really as a public good. In other words, that we need a system of identification in order to really efficiently...
I'm going to stop you because you're going off target.
No.
Because the question is, because the young lady said she supports all of that,
So
she wants to know how you're going to pay for it.
So I'm coming back to it, Dion. So how we're going to pay for it is that it's going to be factored in the government's budget. In other words, the budget that we do each year, we will have an allocation for the National Identification System and the National Identification Registration Authority.
And do you have an estimate yet of what that is?
So that's what I'm saying. So we're doing some of the work now. What we have seen thus far is based on the model and based on the inflows that are coming in from the Registrar General Department, based on the fact that a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the equipment, all of that will already be provided for. What will be left now is maintenance and moving forward, that we believe that there will be enough funds to keep the system going. But outside of that, the most important thing is that it is a priority of the government. So we do have a budget, and we will budget for the National Identification System.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, but let me ask the other two gentlemen if they want to come in. Mr. Graham, you want to comment?
Well, what Floyd has said, so the opposition, the PNP, supports the national identification in the form that it is in.
Are you worried as to sustainability of financing?
Right. So coming to right, that's where we're getting to.
My program going to run out of time.
Because
now.
there are no initial issues about the head of the chief technocrat in to manage the NIDS or the rollout in terms of the salary of the person, and that has been discussions that are in
You mean people
public
were
spaces.
concerned that the salary was too low?
It is too low to attract the right
but
people.
again, you're going off target, Mr. Graham, man. Are you concerned, or is it that you have no concerns about that? Do you think the sustainability will be not a problem?
Well, I was just making that point to say that if you're building a budget and you start to build a budget with a low base for your CEO, then you could have problems because your budget might not be able to support. So you need to build a budget that is proper and that can support what you want to do. That's
Got you. Mr. Shackelford?
I'll start with a disclaimer of being slightly off target, but I think it touches on the question of the
You're preempting me.
of how expensive these programs are, and especially the initial rollout of these programs. And we're seeing particularly across the developing world, from some African states to some Southern Asian states and Eastern European states, the implementation of these national ID systems backed by international funding agencies. And I think that raises questions about the nature of these systems. You would see some developed countries try and roll out a national ID system. As you may know, England tried it and it was struck down, and it just wasn't pursued anymore. But it's being pursued across the developing world with this type of funding, and I think that's curious and interesting.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I'll have to speak to. So one of the things that was raised by Hugh, I think we're passing that hurdle. I think we have recognized that there's an overarching need for reform in relation to our public sector, and the Minister of Finance is leading that charge. So this new agency that we'll bring to the fore will benefit from these new categorizations and from higher salaries right across the board. And I think that is important to attracting. And again, we have taken on private sector approach. The other thing, this is not driven by any international agency. This is the government indicating a priority of government and going outside to seek the funding, right? And it's very different, because ultimately it starts from a place where we've been having this discussion for 40 years that we need a system of identification, Dion. And the government, just as it has sought funding in relation to agriculture, so the Ready To program that we are doing now, and tourism, we have gone and we've borrowed the money. We've borrowed, just listen to what I'm saying. We've borrowed the money from various sources to put it into these programs. Is about the government identifying a priority. And why that last aspect is important, because one, this is Jamaican fulfilling what we have wanted to do for the last 40 years. And this also signifies there's a priority that will be accounted for as we budget going forward.
All right, I need to move on because we have a whole heap of questions, but let me just say that the concern I have listening to you, though, it sounds as if y'all are moving ahead with the implementation of a system for which you still don't know what the recurrent cost is going to be. And this cannot be compared to an agriculture system or whatever, because if this is not properly funded,
Dion,
it's going to be worries.
I want you to be assured, and let me dress back. One, we already have preliminary estimates of what the recurrent cost would be. Two,
what are those?
I wouldn't give the preliminary estimates, and I'll tell you why. Because we've hired experts to do not only a recurrent cost, but a feasibility study of how you're going to sustain it, right? So one, we already have an idea that we're working with in relation to our budgeting, but we're getting technical expertise. And three, what we've said, it is a priority. No, once it is a priority, it means that is one of the things that the government will budget for to finance, because that's why I didn't go off track when I said it's a public good.
Okay, let's go to our next video question if we could.
The NIDS thing, first time when it was introduced, rumors going around was saying that it's a way to put microchipping in person. So because of that, I'm not too much for the NIDS. So because I don't know how true it is anyway still.
So it is not, absolutely not an attempt to put in a microchip, nothing like that, right? And I appreciate that a lot was said in the first go around. And I also appreciate that part of what we'll have to do is get on the road, do these programs, so that people understand there's nothing untoward. We're not trying to hide under nothing. This is a really transparent, accountable system. And I love to say to people, yes, I'm in the political realm, but I'm a youth from country. I'm from Junction, St. Elizabeth, right, who worked hard, decided to choose politics, and have looked at this system through those eyes. What this system is about is how can we make life easier. You see, because we haven't had an identification.
Hold that thought, because that question is coming as
No
well,
problem.
and I'll go to it. All right, so here is a question from Twitter. Xavier says, will there be an independent review into safety features regarding data of citizens, considering the past technological incompetencies that we've seen?
Yeah, I think NIDS is the only system that has built in 2 forms of oversight, and we thought it was very, very important to do that way because of all the challenges that we've seen, not only here in Jamaica, but internationally. So one, by law, there is an independent inspectorate that will oversee the operations of the National Identification and Registration Authority. That independent inspectorate is established by law. That independent inspectorate will report to Parliament. Outside of that, NIDS will also have to fall under and falls under and was passed after the bill and the act, after the Data Protection Act has been passed. And under the Data Protection Act, and we do have to continue to do some work to build out the structures around that, but under the Data Protection Act, the Information Commissioner, again, is another independent authority that will consistently review the processes of NIDS, how are we complying with the Data Protection Act and issues of data security. So the answer is yes.
Andre Shackelford, let me bring you in because I know that issue of data security is a huge issue. We have some more questions I know coming on it as well, but based on what you're seeing in the current system, are you satisfied?
Well, starting with what the minister mentioned about the independent oversight of the authority, that's good. That's one of the things which the Chief Justice in the earlier constitutional decision concerning NIDS had mentioned and had noted as something that was necessary. In relation to the technical security and the technical aspects of the data security, firstly, one can never be too sure about how that's going to take place. That something which is modern and up-to-date now is going to be modern and up-to-date down the line. Secondly, I think what's really important is that this backlash that was received in relation to the Jam-COVID issue in terms of Cybersecurity Act and prosecuting people for doing vulnerability research, that needs to be completely shut down because explain for my viewers what you mean. Certainly. So when the fracas surrounding the Jam-COVID Act took place, there were some utterances from government about prosecuting international researchers for uncovering vulnerabilities.
So TechCrunch that had published the article saying there were vulnerabilities.
Certainly.
Mr. Green's government suggested they were going to lock up. Lock up what?
They are. Just to say, we all know right now the cyber crimes bill is actually under review, and it's one of the matters it's one of the matters that's being looked at. That the whole concept is of ethical hackers, people who test systems to ensure that they're living up to standards. So I know a lot has been said. I know a lot has been said, but I think the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology was very clear. He didn't make any statement of that nature, and what we've been doing is looking to see how it can be accommodated in the modern world.
No man, he made a statement of that nature. You might
the
say
Minister of Science?
You might say
the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology.
I can go on my phone and bring up.
Okay, I don't remember.
I'm not pretending it may have been one of your other ministers.
No, and that's why I was specific.
There was a statement.
That's why I was specific there.
There was a statement made about possible prosecution that I can tell you the journalist himself interpreted as an implied threat.
So dear, why I say the Minister of Science is because
hold
we
on
would
for me.
have
I'm going to come back.
oversight.
I'm going to come back, but I'm being told to take a break. So let me just go to the break. Remember, you can tweet along with us. Our hashtag is TVJ. All angles soon come.